And now we're moving to our second session, which is about the Scouts, which is really, really useful. And actually it's going to address some of the questions that have come up after the first session. So that's brilliant. I will introduce Lara Burns, who is going to be speaking, who is the Chief Digital Officer at the Scouts, and is going to talk to us about how the organization that she works at has had to transform very, very rapidly, both in terms of the Scouting program itself, but also how they use digital internally from at the beginning of the lockdown. So from working with the volunteers digitally, to campaigns, to talking about the organization itself and what you do internally in terms of developing those digital skills. She's going to address all of this, and then we're going to have again a session to discuss any questions that you may have, and I'm sure I will have a lot. So please start thinking about questions as well, and put them in the Q&A as you go. And yeah, over to you, Lara.
Hi, I'm Lara Burns and I'm Chief Digital Officer for the Scouts. We're the UK's largest co-education youth movement, and we help 460,000 young people speak up, play their part and gain the skills they need for life. We have 165,000 volunteers helping us deliver this amazing mission. We've seen rapid digital transformation in so many areas in the last few months. And today I'm going to talk about a few of the amazing things that have been happening at the Scouts. So digital transformation, this is a quote I've used over many years when talking about digital transformation, and it's always been hard. But the thing about the pandemic is that suddenly so many incredible things have happened with digital from my point of view, and it's been pretty easy and it's been scarily fast. Suddenly, no one's arguing, why should we do it? What's in it for me? Agile is too scary. Oh, I just don't understand. We haven't had to organise complex workshops to get that stakeholder buy-in. It's just kind of happened. When I joined the Scouts last September, if anyone had told me just some of what we've done would have been possible, I would have laughed. But we're in different times. What's also so exciting for me is that many of the Scouts' values, which are core to why we're still here after 100 years, are so relevant in the digital space. Our values of care, cooperation, and giving it a go have never been more apparent than the last few months. So what have we done? Well, our main challenge goes to the core of what we're about. Scouting is about skills for life, about adventures, about being outdoors, about campfires and night treks. How on earth could we do all of that with everyone on lockdown? The creativity and innovation of our volunteers has been incredible. Early on, so many of our volunteers started doing virtual scouting. We saw it really quickly. They were talking a bit about it on Facebook. And when we surveyed them in early April, we realised that huge numbers were already doing this by trial and error, sometimes with only a few young people attending. And I've also heard some great stories. I heard about an autistic boy who for the first time could attend a virtual St. George's Day parade. Normally it was the sort of event he wouldn't have been comfortable attending, being around too many people. But now he could take part and make his annual scouting promise alongside all the others in his troop on Zoom. Now, Zoom as a platform has been a massive factor for us in enabling this rapid change. Lots of people seem to be using Zoom, well, like half the world. So we went to Zoom headquarters and were cheeky. We asked Zoom for free licenses for all our local Scout groups. And since the beginning of June, over 50% have signed up for our leaders to use the free platform through us. And one of the advantages of this as well is that we can set up the safety and security features up front. And so far in June already, we've held over 14,500 meetings with over 91,000 participants from local Scout groups. Just amazing. The other enabling factor for us has been our content. Within a few days of shutdown, our content team had created a portal page which repurposed around 100 amazing activities, content that we have spent the last year already developing for our online program planning tool. The page focused on just the indoor activities. We blasted it out on social media, and our Great Indoors campaign provided fantastic content to get those Scout leaders going on those Zoom calls. Now, one of our massive challenges was actually making sure that all our leaders had the right support. We quickly realised that a lot of them were trying to use technology that they weren't very comfortable with. Alongside those innovative leaders that had started the trend were many who we needed to step in with to give more support to. And particularly in terms of safeguarding, we had some early issues and quickly had to put together basic guidance on our website about how to set up security settings to keep young people safe on Zoom. And now the advantage of our Zoom partnership for those who've made the most of the free license deal is we've already set up some of those basic security settings up front. We've also worked with other partners such as Barclays and their Digital Eagles volunteers. They helped put out a webinar pretty early on with about 500 attendees, which helped us with absolute basics like setting up a Zoom account. Since then, we've put together a series of webinars to help build on these skills. And one of our longer term plans is really thinking about what we've learned about the gaps in the digital skills and confidence in our volunteers. Some may be fully up to speed with Zoom, but we know many still can't or don't want to use the digital tools. So we're planning how to support those volunteers in their ongoing digital journey. We're currently developing a framework based on the skills we think a volunteer needs, with a plan to curate resources for them. That's a work in progress. We're currently developing it with a group of volunteers themselves from other sectors who are on furlough. But I really hope that we can help come up with something that could maybe be used across other charities. Now, as I said already, the beauty of our Great Indoors campaign was it repurposed existing content, which allowed us to move quickly. And as we saw early on, the likelihood that schools were going to close. Our massive success on social media attracted not only existing Scout leaders and parents, but new parents who didn't really know much about Scouting, but who we could help provide support with activities to do with their kids alongside homeschooling. And they came to our website in huge numbers. We've had 712,000 unique views to date. And we've started to engage with this whole new audience who might not have ever thought about Scouting for their kids before. We're now emailing those parents weekly updates with new content, so they're an obvious audience for us to go back to when Scouting face-to-face starts again, and we can hopefully recruit their children into our movement. We're also really proud of our Hike to the Moon, a digital fundraiser which got Scouts and others collectively hiking to the moon and back. We curated amazing user-generated videos and content along with celebrity ambassadors. And also we were raising money for others, which is a core part of our Scouting values. In fact, we raised over £390,000 for BBC Children in Need and Comic Relief. So with match funding, that means we've contributed nearly 800,000 in total. That success shows us how we can think really creatively in the digital space, but as well as focusing on our core values in the physical space. So in this case, we were helping others and going on adventures, which are both core parts of the Scouting promise. Both elements meant the campaign resonated brilliantly with both current and new audiences. As well as breaking the mould in how our volunteers work with young people, equally important has been the opportunity for us to smash through the barriers internally. In the last 3 months, we've done things that would just not have been possible in January, and they would have taken weeks, months, or even years of consultation, planning, and debate. These things I can genuinely pay tribute to my amazing team for achieving. We ran a members call through Zoom. Big deal, you might think, but over 14,000 people joined. I think the world record is about 16,000, so we just missed that. But we all thought that was pretty cool. But what was really cool was the fact that our SLT were talking face to face to our volunteers. Previously, we've tried to do road shows, travelled up and down the country, obviously at significant cost and time. But now we can talk to them straight, answer questions, and everyone's sitting at home. First barrier smashed. On March the 16th, way back then, we had planned a trial work from home day as we were worried about how our tech systems might stand up, and we thought we'd better test it. We thought it was pretty impressive that we managed to support our payroll team that day to run the payroll remotely, especially with the finance team who were very unconfident with the tools and some pretty aging legacy setup. In fact, that trial day just extended and we've never been back to the office. We proved we could do everything we needed to run the organisation from home. Barrier 2 smashed. Now, we've been planning to roll out Microsoft Teams, but with a 3-month pilot and extensive training and support from an external and quite costly company. Well, we rolled out Teams, like many of you, in about 2 weeks. We had support from internal self-appointed Teams champions, and we provided some pretty basic guidance, mainly with links to videos on the Microsoft site. Everyone loves it. People tell me, isn't it good how we can chat really easily? Isn't it great how we can collaborate on a single document and avoid emails? These are people who thought terms like collaboration were scary. Barrier 3 smashed. And like many charities, we have a lot of board and committee meetings with our volunteers, and they're mostly out of hours and over weekends. These previously involved many staff setting up meetings, printing out minutes to send out in advance, coordinating slides, and attending the meetings at weekends to take notes. Quite honestly, no one really liked that setup, but the prospect of how we might move to something different was pretty daunting. Guess what? We now use a software tool to run meetings digitally. They're quite often shorter. We don't have to send out printed materials, and we're moving away from weekend meetings because people can fit them in after work with no need to travel. Barrier 4 smashed. And one of my personal biggest challenges is that I've had 5 new team members start since lockdown. And we've had to think really differently about how we can induct them, onboard them to be as effective as they can be, but whilst also supporting them and welcoming them to our team. That's no small feat. Of course, we're still like you in the middle of all of this change. For me, it's been a fascinating time, which has made us all stop and think about what we're doing. Are we delivering what we really should be? How can we save money as many of us are fighting for financial survival? How can we use digital to do all of this better or more effectively? And what's also changed in the digital space and there's no coming back from? I'm sure many of you are asking the same questions right now. We've also seen some really interesting things start to develop. We're figuring out a whole new delivery model, how to blend socially distanced face-to-face scouting when we go back to it with digital and online scouting. We've done a U-turn on our training for volunteers where we have to do a massive safeguarding and safety element, as you'd imagine. And we're now planning how we will only deliver this online going forwards. We're planning a whole new way of recruiting both volunteers and young people, starting with what we've learned from our social media campaign successes. And we're developing those digital campaigns to fundraise for the Scouts, not only because we need to raise funds, but because we've shown that we can reach and engage new audiences. And as many projects become digital, we're working out how we can upskill more and more staff, with the ultimate aim to move to multidiscipline teams with digital capabilities as part of their toolkit. We're still in the thick of figuring all of this stuff out, but one thing's really clear: never has digital been so clearly part of almost every element of our organisational strategy. So that's a whistle-stop tour around some of the stuff that's been happening at the Scouts in an amazing 3 months. Here are some of my thoughts on things we've learned and we'll keep reminding ourselves of as we go forwards. Don't get distracted. Focus on digitising your core service, not the bits around the edges, because that's where you can provide the real value. Secondly, don't think you have to start from scratch. There's so much of content or tech that you can repurpose and reuse if you think creatively. And if you have got a volunteer movement, use them, or use volunteers from other sectors, or get help from staff volunteers as advocates. Just don't try to do all that heavy lifting on your own. Check in with your users, however fast you're doing things. Sometimes it's easy to forget that. Send them a survey, ask them on social media, keep testing your products as you go. And use this opportunity to move at speed and try things out. Don't take too long figuring out all the things that might go wrong. You can try it, learn from it, and keep improving. My favourite mantra of all time: just do it. That's it from me. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Lara. That was fantastic, inspiring, really, how you've managed to turn what would have been for an organization like Scouts, which, as you say, is all about campfires and going outside, could have been really a very challenging situation. It sounds like you've managed to turn that into a huge opportunity, which is wonderful. We've had lots of questions, which I'm going to go through. I wanted to point out to all the users, and thank you for explaining how you went to Zoom and got free licenses, which is brilliant. They're good for you. There is a program both with Zoom and Microsoft through Charity Digital where you can get discounted licenses, not necessarily free, but at least discounted. And it, as Lara said, it is well worth investing that time to get all of the power of the platform and use it in the way that you guys have done, Lara. A lot of questions coming through around the issue of safeguarding, consent, permission, child protection, digital safety. I mean, obviously you're dealing with young people there. It'd be great to get a sort of sense from you as to how you've dealt with all that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously safeguarding and safety is a key part of what we do normally. We've got a pretty big safeguarding team that's grown rapidly in the last 5-6 years, as you'd imagine. So it's something that's kind of core to what we do anyway. So I guess for us to flip that into permissions around digital wasn't really a big deal. As soon as we saw that people were starting to have Zoom calls with groups of young people, we put out guidelines. So literally within a couple of days, and we've moved and obviously added to them. But things like we advise people to always make sure that they had another adult in the Zoom meeting. So we expect 2 adults in the Zoom meeting, again, as we would face to face. We would also say things like, don't have a breakout room with only 1 adult there, you need 2. So some things which, again, some of our volunteers might go, oh god, that's really difficult to do, but part of our guidelines are always about obviously keeping young people safe, but also keeping our adult volunteers safe, and making sure they're doing things properly. We had quite a lot of stuff really early on where people were learning to use the tools before we had our central platform. So people didn't understand how to lock a room. They didn't understand properly how to give out passwords unique to every session. Obviously in those days, Zoom itself put in kind of rapid security stuff really early on in April. So we were just being really cautious of watching what was going on and updating our guidance really quickly. So I think that was the most important thing for us, particularly with volunteers, some of whom were really enthusiastic, but didn't actually understand necessarily, they weren't comfortable using the tools and they were new to them as well. Does that answer all the questions, or is there anything else there that we need to answer?
I think it answers many of them, at least. If you feel like you haven't been answered, please put it back in. I'd love to go to another group of questions, which is about the corporate partners that you've brought in. So you talked about Zoom, you talked about Microsoft, you talked about Barclays, which sounds like you've really engaged with corporate partners in a way that's been super powerful and leverage their skills. Is this something that is it new? Is it something you want to do more of? How did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not new. We've got quite a wide group of corporate partners. A lot of corporate partners tend to work with us where they sponsor a badge. So we have lots of different badges. For instance, we've got a digital citizenship badge that's launching very soon that actually Nominet support us with. So we've got some really great relationships already with a whole load of corporate partners. And Barclays was someone that we were already talking to and already engaged with. So we actually, to ask them to do a little bit different and help us with the webinars with the digital eagles was pretty easy because we already had that relationship. Zoom was completely new. We don't use Zoom internally. Well, we're not supposed to. Probably some of my colleagues do, but
but we're all there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we kind of had thought, oh, maybe we might want to use Zoom at some point in the future, and we hadn't got around to it. We use Microsoft Teams internally, as I've said. So we literally just emailed them. And I had a contact with someone that I'd met at a conference, a sort of senior person last autumn, and we just emailed them and kind of started the conversation. So, it's definitely something that we're already doing. We definitely think we need to do more of, but, we've got a really small fundraising team compared to a lot of big charities. And I think it's just about being bold and being cheeky, really, in this sense. People can only say no. What have you got to lose?
Yeah, that's absolutely the right. I think that's the great advice. There have been a couple of questions about onboarding new staff. You mentioned it was quite tricky. We'll go through that a little bit in other sessions. But if you've got a few ideas or thoughts about what worked, what didn't work so well, and how you managed to do this in the most collegial way possible with the new staff, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard because we had offered them jobs sort of, during the process of February. We're expecting them to start the end of March into April. I mean, during the time from as soon as we were locking down, obviously I was actually having personal conversations with them. There was a lot of reassurance because, they were obviously worried whether we were actually going to still see through the contract, frankly, which was a fair enough worry, but we were. We've absolutely needed them. So a lot of it was just initially personal engagement from me or from their line managers. We kind of thought through really carefully all the people that we would normally expect them to meet, where you would do a face-to-face induction. So we set all of those up in advance. But I think what I was really careful to do was also make sure that I gave them lots of thinking time. So it's very easy, as we've all experienced with Zoom or whatever, to just block out your diary, boom, 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 boom. Obviously, as a new person trying to learn about a new organization, you need to have maybe some intense, mornings of meeting people, but then a bit of downtime, so that trying to allow them time to do the reading, to do the thinking. We've also done something which I think has been really useful, although you'd have to ask them, which we set up a sort of buddy group between the 5 of them, and they all meet, I think, at least once a week, where they just have a chat, and it's a sort of opportunity for them to ask the stupid questions that they don't dare maybe ask in a more formal meeting. Interestingly, one of the things that one of my new colleagues has said to me is that they've found really difficult is they don't have that kind of coffee machine moment.
Yeah.
So the moment where you just meet someone in the kitchen while you're making a coffee and you chat to them and you say, oh hi, I'm new, I work for this team, what do you do? And you kind of find out a little bit more about them, or you ask about their dog or whatever it is. And all of those little human moments that are just informal and casual, obviously as new starters they don't have. So I think that's been particularly difficult. So we have tried to recreate those a bit. And obviously, I guess a lot of people have been doing that within, existing team meetings or whatever. I think it's just really turning those experiences up. So allowing 10 minutes at the beginning of a meeting just to have a chit chat and not getting stressed because you're not getting to the agenda. Those people need to have time to build up those social connections with people, and it's really hard to throw them into the thick of a really hard project without having built up any relationships with people. So I think it's been tough for them. It's been tough for everyone in lots of different ways. But I they're all doing brilliant work already. So hopefully, they've engaged enough and they still, feel free to answer questions whenever they want.
I think that's great. Those are really, really good advice, and it can be tough. But I've also heard that in some ways, sometimes you do create strong links with other staff members faster because you're all in this weird situation together. We have had a couple of really interesting questions from 2 different perspectives. In the future, in the post-COVID world, you've talked about a blended strategy, which some people are getting very excited about and what that might look like. But others, Nick Bush is asking, is there a potential for old behaviors and attitudes to come back? Is there a risk that this sort of general inertia will get you back to exactly where you were before the crisis?
Frankly, I don't think so. I think we've all come way too far for people to just flip back to something else. I might be completely wrong, but I don't think so. I think people have seen so many benefits. People might be really wishing that they could go back to an office, but at the same time they're going, wow, I've just gained two hours where I'm not commuting and sitting in my car on the M25 or on the tube or whatever. So I think, you know, most of us can see there are a lot of benefits to not just stepping back. Obviously, we've had some of our volunteers that haven't engaged with any digital scouting at all, and that's absolutely fine. They are the people that probably we will have to work harder with if we do want to have a sort of blended model. And I think we would probably be going down the line of not mandating, you know, it's going to be optional. Certainly at the moment, we are literally right now planning to go have some kind of socially distanced scouting to go back within the next few weeks, you know, according to government guidelines. We had a webinar with all of our members, about 10,000 people yesterday, where we were explaining how we were going to do that. So people are going to be able to go back to scouting with small groups outside in July. We kind of need to see how that goes. So some of this is, how is it going to go? Will people be able to do a small group outside one week and then do a digital session the other week? And part of our next bit of work over July, August, September is a lot of user research. You know, we need to listen to volunteers, to parents, and to young people to find out how they are finding it and what they think, and that will be really a key part of how we move into our new strategy. I think what we're thinking with the strategy for digital, though, is also that we might be able to meet the needs of new groups that we haven't reached before. So, for instance, young carers who can't typically leave the house to go to a face-to-face scouting meeting in the evening, but could do an hour of digital. You know, can we come up with a program that would suit their needs? So I think that's really exciting. And I think when we talk to our volunteers, we talk about all of this. We talk about, you know, we've learned lots, we've adapted, but let's remember what we've learned and let's see those opportunities going forwards. Let's not just forget them in the dash to go back to what it was.
Yeah, I mean, I love the story of that little boy who could join the parade for the first time. It's obvious that this will allow you to reach new people who maybe were not suited to the traditional form of scouting, which is lovely. We've got some really nice comments. Charlotte Bridgewater, who I think was part of your new starter buddy
She
group,
is, yes.
she said, I'm glad to say that she agrees with you. She said that specifically Microsoft Teams has been really great for these little an informal catch up, so that's useful. And also Paul Brownville says that some aspects of scouting from his perspective, for instance, the recent AGM was actually better because it was better attended than because it was virtual, and so you had more of a presence. So it's interesting to see that, although very different in some aspects, this could be, you know, not all aspects, but in some aspects this could be an improvement. We have a few questions here. There's one from Susan Lowe about online badges, and another one from Rosita Karami about sign-up process, which I actually think are linked. It's about digital identity to some extent. It's how do you make those things work? How do you get people to sign up and verify who they are? How do you keep them online badges and make sure they go to the right person, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, we do not centralize this stuff, just to be clear. So each scouting group is a separate entity. It's a separate charity. So we've got roughly 8 small local charities that make up the scouting movement. That's why we use the word movement. So each group does manage it themselves. They manage how the kids get their badges. We provide the framework. We provide these are the kind of activities and the program that will contribute towards those badges, but we do not manage all of that centrally. So that sits with the local group. A lot of local groups use a system that we are partnered with, but it is a separate system called Online Scout Manager, which leaders use to track their young people's progress through the badges. But again, that is locally managed by the individual group with their own, you know, license as part of that. So we don't have at the moment that concept of a digital identity for all young people. They don't log on to our website, and we know who they are and we know what they're doing. it is something that we might want to go to, but I think it's quite a big stretch. And quite a big stretch from our model, frankly. It's not really from a technical point of view. It's more the fact that our model is hyper local, and that's part of our strength, so that every young person interacts mainly with their local scout leader. And that is where the power of what we do is really core to us.
And on the other end of this, did you connect with other scout organizations in other countries? Was there some form of sort of sharing of knowledge and expertise?
We are all connected. We're part of the World Scout movement. Obviously, scouting actually started in the UK, as you probably all know, but we are part of a worldwide movement that we contribute to. I think within the COVID situation, we've all kind of just got on with things on our own. I mean, probably the same as everyone out there. You know, this is why these kind of conferences are quite good to kind of check in with other people, because frankly, we've all been like, oh God, you know, what are we going to do next? How are we going to, you know, I think we haven't really had the time. I think now is the time, as we rethink potentially new ways with our strategy or this blended approach. That's when we're going to have maybe a bit of a breath, a step back, take a breath, and then chat to other people and find out what else people are doing. But frankly, yeah, I've got no idea what other people are doing in the World Scout movement. Haven't had a time, probably should do, but I haven't had time to look.
And talking about time, I mean, it's for a lot of people, this has been a very, very hectic time. It sounds like for you and your team, it's been crazy. How have you managed the team morale, the burnout, this sort of issues remotely?
You maybe need to ask Charlotte. She can add to the chat. Some of my team, I think, are online. I mean, like anyone, I think we've just been really careful. Scouts is actually an amazing place to work, and we have had incredible leadership from our CEO, Matt Hyde, who is very, very transparent and open. I mean, right from the start, we have had online entire staff meetings that he has led, and he comes on and he says, oh, I've had a really bad week this week. I've been really low, but this happened. So actually, the fact that our culture is very much about being transparent, about talking about stuff if it's tough, about working together, that's really helped. So we very much done that within our team as well. We have weekly team catch-ups, as I'm sure most people do. Those are open to people who are on furlough as well. We've got some of our team on furlough. And they, you know, we've done kind of little things where we've all played sort of Mural. You know, we use Mural as an online tool to share things. So we've done little games like, you know, what do we love about lockdown? What do we hate about lockdown? What are we missing? You know, and just trying to encourage people to be open, I think, is part of it, and realize that we're not, you know, we're not on our own. We all have bad days, we all have good days. I do a lot of walking meetings now that we're allowed out more, obviously. So I just put my phone on and my headphones on and I walk around the field, and that's really, really important for me. And trying to encourage my team to do that is also really important. I think it's also about being flexible, as we all are now anyway. I think we've always been like that as my team. So if someone wants to work from 6 a.m. to 3 a.m. and then spend time with their kids, that's fine by me. It's about empowering people to make, you know, sensible decisions about their own lives and the best way that it's going to work from them, which obviously actually digital enables us to do that. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, it's great because that's now embedded pretty much through the whole organization. So let's just keep going with it.
I love the idea of walking around the field where you're doing a call. I might have to find a field and do that because it sounds very relaxing. A question here. Oh, look, Charlotte's also added very good points, which is to step away from the laptop, stretch your legs, hydrate. That is very true. And don't, and that will allow you to take some distance and come back to your work refreshed. Those are excellent tips. And don't forget Zoe and Rabia's breathing exercises. One really interesting question, which I mean, it's more of an open question, so I'm not expecting you to have the full answer, but I'd love to hear what your views are, is about digital exclusion. And, you know, the fact that while you are able to connect with people in populations that you might not have been able to talk to before, like young carers or children with autism, for instance, there are also young people who just don't have access to the technology. And is that something you're considering? Is that something you've been talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough. And obviously, if you look at a lot of the debate around schooling and how hard that's been for families where, well, not necessarily they don't have any devices, but they only have one device for one family. So how can they do schooling? So, obviously we are very mindful of that. My previous role was at Age UK. Where I was always very, very mindful that the older population are the ones who are most likely to be digitally excluded. We haven't played an active role in thinking about that. I think there are a lot of other organisations that are focusing on that, particularly through the schooling, where there is hopefully more and more funding for devices to go out to young people. But a lot of our shift in our strategy in the forthcoming months will be particularly on focusing on young people in areas of deprivation. Particularly areas that might have been really hardest hit by COVID from an economic point of view. And our belief is that scouting can be a really important part of building those young people's lives up, giving them skills for employment, etc., but also being part of a community and helping to build the community. So some of the work that we're looking at and the bids that we're trying to work on are including in that, for instance, pay for a certain number of devices that we could actually, as part of building up scouting, hand out to young people. We're the same as a lot of charities. We don't have the money, so we're going into bids trying to get the money in at the moment. But that is definitely part of some of our thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you say, there are a lot of charities who've specifically focused on that, but it's great to hear that it's something that you've been working on. There is a question from Malati Mutu, who's asking whether you might share some of your, for instance, your online safeguarding documents and some of the resources that you've put together. Is that something that you'd be happy to share with a wider group? Or
yeah, I mean, I think most of our safeguarding documents are on our website anyway.
Oh, well, there you go.
So people can go and look at them. But yeah, if anyone's got some specific things that they want to ask or want to get some help with, I'm very happy to share stuff. Yeah.
Fantastic. Let's talk about volunteers. You obviously are working with a lot of volunteers, and you've said that some of them were very quick and comfortable embracing the digital skills. Some of them were much harder. You've put on some great training. What else in the longer term? How do you see yourself managing your volunteer teams? And in terms of digital, enabling them to use digital skills?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's it's difficult. We've got a massive challenge. We've got 165,000 volunteers.
Yeah.
We cannot assume that all of them are really happy with digital. The same as the general population. And obviously, some of our volunteers are older, so therefore they are less maybe comfortable. So yeah, as I said, we're doing a lot of thinking about longer term development of skills. And we are developing a framework at the moment where we are thinking about, okay, as a volunteer, not necessarily as a staff member or as a member of a citizen, what are the kind of key things that I would need to do if I'm a volunteer? How do I manage my local scout group, and what digital skills do I need? So they might be particularly things like, understanding how to do a digital safeguard call with safeguarding in mind, or it might be particularly of how to develop some great content and use video, for instance, as part of a program. Or how to think about social media. So there's lots of different things that we're thinking about. We're not creating new resources. We are linking to loads of there's lots of brilliant content out there. Charity digital skills, SCVO, loads of people have already got brilliant digital skills resources. But what we're trying to very much think about and group them around is, if I'm a volunteer starting from here or here or here, what might I learn next, and it's taking them on that learning journey. So I think we will really keep developing that. We're going to keep doing webinars for people so they can keep learning at their own pace. It will be very much part of our overall learning experience. As a volunteer for the Scouts, you probably have to do quite a lot more training than you might do maybe for other organisations. So we will hopefully be building that in as part of their profile. I think it's hard. It has to be optional. I don't think it can be compulsory or mandated. You know, we need to take people on a journey with us. But I think where we're quite interesting as an organisation is most of our work is developed, it is co-designed with volunteers. Every single thing we do, most of our groups have staff and they have volunteers on our project groups. So that really helps. It's not like we are doing stuff to our volunteers. We are not designing it without them. We are talking with volunteers as we develop things and say, well, how would you like to do this? Well, how would this be better for you? And I think that then when we're introducing it to volunteers, they understand that it's already come from peers. You know, it's not from staff, you know, mandating stuff. Yeah, the head office, which we do get that. We get that a lot, but you know, I think a lot of our methodology outside of digital helps with that. So I work, I've got a digital program board, and I have a senior volunteer who works alongside me, who is a Scout leader and who's been involved with Scouting for a long time. So sometimes if we're doing a webinar, you know, for instance, we did one the other day about some of the data protection that we're working on. He led the webinar. I didn't. I answered one question. So again, hearing it from volunteers, not from staff HQ, really makes a difference. But I think a lot of it is with all these things, it's a bit of trial and error. It's okay, well, we'll do one thing, or they didn't really like that, or no one looked at that web page. Well, let's try something else, you know, in the same way as we would do anything digital.
I've got a question here. It's a bit technical, but I think it's interesting because reading it, I've wondered myself. It says, how did you overcome the security on SharePoint for setting up teams for working on documents collaboratively? Which I think means you've got your volunteers and they're not necessarily on your corporate system, obviously. How do you then use SharePoint to use them?
Can I come back to you on that, because we haven't worked that one out yet?
Okay, excellent. It's we literally question. Nobody knows.
Yeah, we again, one of my technical colleagues might be on the line and have already worked it out, but when we launched Teams, we only launched it really to staff members. We haven't launched it amongst all our volunteers, and you know, that is one of our challenges, because obviously with 165,000 volunteers we cannot afford the licenses, frankly, Microsoft, if you're listening, because they are not, because I think there is something in the licenses, if you want to use Teams and that sort of collaborative stuff, where if a volunteer does more than 1 day a week, which most of our volunteers do, they are considered almost a staff, so therefore you have to pay the staff license costs. We can't afford that. So yeah, quite frankly, we haven't got to that yet. So we're still thinking through the permissions. If anyone's got some advice, let us know.
Please put it in the chat. You will be the hero of the day. We're up for any big question. It's one of the limitations, isn't it? It's both more secure, obviously, Microsoft, and from that perspective, you know, safer to deal with, but it's also got quite a lot of limitations in terms of permissions. I'm going to finish now with just asking you, this is called the Digital Leadership Day. As a leader, as a digital leader, how do you think you've changed through this? What have you learned? What have you sort of are you coming out of this a different person? Have you found that some of your assumptions and beliefs have been shaken, or are you actually, is it all confirmed things that you pretty much thought already?
Oh, that's a difficult one. Very philosophical.
Yes.
I don't think anything radical has happened for me. As I said earlier in my presentation, it's actually been great in some ways, because all this change has happened and I kind of feeling like I haven't done anything. So it's actually been almost a relief that I haven't had to work as hard. I mean, in terms of, you know, all that pushing and shoving and motivating and rah-ing, that that hasn't been so hard for me as I've had in previous months and years, where I'm always feeling like I'm pushing the boulder up the hill. So actually that's been quite nice, where I can just kind of sit back and watch a bit. I think my own resilience, the same as probably most people, has been challenged. And I've had to work really hard at picking myself up, going for those walks, doing all those things that I need to do personally to kind of keep going. So I think, that's just been challenged the same as for everyone. I think what has been challenged as well is really having to keep asking some difficult questions, particularly to, senior leadership teams, which is kind of, don't assume this is all going to stop. How can we make the most of this opportunity? It's not just a fluke. Let's keep going. Let's put more digital into our strategy as we rethink it. Let's not just assume that it's all going to go back. So I think for me, it's been trying to keep my eye on a bit of the longer game. A lot of my team are literally day to day focusing on the immediate stuff. I think for me, the challenge has been to step away slightly from the immediate. I've got a great team that can work on the immediate, but to sort of think a bit more long term. So what's it going to be like for us coming out of this? What could digital scouting look like? What could our office reimagined look like? What do our ways of working look like? Let's think 6 months, a year on, and that's hard, because you want to be, you have to live in the moment as well. So I think that's my biggest challenge, really, is keep looking further forward.
That's brilliant, and that's great advice, and a difficult one as well to follow. Thank you so much, Lara. I think that's been amazing. We've really grilled you there, but it's added, your presentation was brilliant, and our chat has really added a lot to it. So thank you so much.